Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of season 2 of Who Ate It First. I don't know if I need to say that, but welcome to Who Ate It First.
Hello, welcome.
How have you been since our last episode?
Fine. I'm not really sure what's been going on because October is going by really quickly.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Have a lot of stuff going on.
I think I'm just no thoughts, all vibes right now. Just vibes.
Vibing through October.
What was the month we called it last time? September, November, December.
Yeah.
September.
Septoc November or something like that.
September. I think is what I said.
September.
Yeah. Because that's actually how fast it goes.
Yeah.
Scientifically speaking, that is how fast it goes. I'm a scientist.
So, I am so excited, and I hope everyone else is excited because this is kind of the culmination of everything I've wanted to do in this podcast. This one is going to be about Cubanos. And I am so excited because I was wanting to do this since we made this podcast a concept. Even before we sat down and did the first episode, I wanted to do Cubanos ever since we've talked about making this podcast.
It's true. It's been on a running list.
It has. I think it was on a list for years because we had this idea for this podcast years ago and we didn't refine it until we released our first season, really.
It's true. And maybe not even then. I'm just kidding.
We're still refining it, It's a little rough around the edges. Yeah, I watched the movie Chef 7 years ago, I think.
For the non-knowers, aka myself, who is in Chef?
Chef is a movie directed by and starring Jon Favreau.
Of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yes. I mean, he did a lot of things, but yes, he's most recently known for a couple things, actually. Marvel really setting that off into what it is now. And more recently, a lot of the Star Wars hits have been Jon Favreau, like Mandalorian.
Oh, you're right. I forgot about that.
Yeah, that's all Jon Favreau. So he's just freaking knocking it out of the park time after time. He's pretty amazing. From what I've learned about this was he had been making a lot of big budget action movies with Marvel and wanted to take a step back, go back to some basics and make a much smaller budget movie. So he decided to make Chef, which, as the title suggests, is about a chef who gets frustrated with the routine of being stuck in a rut at a very nice restaurant, but he's not allowed to be creative and he has to stick to what he knows because the owner of the restaurant refuses to let him.
Dustin Hoffman
refuses to let him release that creative energy that he has. He has to keep it buried. So he gets really frustrated, but he's working all the time. And that ends up causing his marriage to get estranged with Sofia Vergara randomly. He was married to Sofia Vergara and then has kind of a fling with Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah.
So Jon Favreau does all right.
He's just a man about town.
Apparently.
He's just doing things well. He's gotten Scarlett Johansson as a little girlfriend.
Yeah, so
okay.
I mean, I feel like he can't complain that much because
honestly, that's what I said. I was like, wait a minute. He was married to Sofia Vergara. What did he do to mess this up? Wait a minute.
I mean, I feel like you're doing all right either way.
Can you stop complaining though?
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Your life is fine. Calm down.
Yeah, so he quits that, opens up a food truck with one of his friends and his son, and they basically do a road trip to bring it back from Florida to California. And during that process, the main thing that they make is Cubanos because they want to bring food from Havana and kind of where Sofia Vergara's character grew up to make it more mainstream and bring it to a lot of people that wouldn't know about Cubanos.
Mm-hmm. Back to LA, right? Or California?
Yeah, they drive the truck from Miami where they got the truck and do a road trip through Miami. They stop in New Orleans. They stop here in Austin, Texas. Eventually make their way back into, I think, LA. And yeah, it's a really cute movie. It's a pretty chill movie. A lot of it's really about him finding his creativity again, as well as being able to bond with his son. Through this road trip, they like rebond, and they all get close to it again. It's a good movie, and you were hesitant about it, but I think you liked it after we watched it.
Yeah, just because you were saying like he went from big budget to wanting to sort of downsize, and I don't know. Whenever you say low budget indie film, I'm like, because I just think like bad production, not interesting plot. Like I just think it's gonna be sucky. But actually, it was quite good. Really an all-star cast. Robert Downey Jr. makes an appearance.
He's in there for a second.
John, I'm gonna butcher his name, Leguizamo. He's in it. There's a couple of other people I think I'm forgetting at the moment, but it's got a bigger cast than I anticipated, and certainly bigger than an indie film. I'm not even sure you could quantify it as an indie film for that reason.
Yeah. Chef Roy Choi was a consultant, eventually became a co-producer of it. So the movie is actually also a little bit about Roy Choi in a way, because he revolutionized street food and food trucks. Like he's one of the architects that took the food truck scene and made it what it is today, like the modern food truck scene.
And his specialty was? His
food truck that was made famous is called the Kogi food truck. Mm. And they did, I think it was like Korean barbecue.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like Korean barbecue taco truck.
Yeah.
And yeah, that like blew up and it got really famous. If I remember correctly, I think I saw this from an interview from like a long time ago, but I think Chef and Jon Favreau met via this food truck, because I think Jon Favreau requested that they bring the food truck onto the sets of like some of the Marvel movies. So they actually met through that and formed a friendship and then wanted to make this movie. Long story short, ever since I saw that movie and they do the scene of making the Cubanos, man, it makes you really want to have one of them. So, and I've wanted to have one for 7 years.
I'm so glad we had them in front of us and we were watching the movie, because you're right. I would have been upset to not have my hands on that sandwich.
Yeah. So normally we'd like make the food in the middle of our episode. This time we did do it beforehand, because it's kind of a long process. I'll get to all that when we start talking about the recipe. But yeah, we watched the movie and ate the Cubanos while we're watching the movie.
It was pretty great.
And it was pretty fun.
It was pretty meta.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like they're doing this thing on the screen and wow, it's right in front of you.
Yeah.
It's pretty great.
So yeah, it was good. It was a lot of fun. So let's jump into actually talking about Cubanos and a bit of the history. So Cubanos are pretty simple. It's a Cuban sandwich. They consist of Cuban bread or pan cubano, ham, mojo pork, Swiss cheese, dill pickles, and mustard. Then it gets pressed into a plancha. Also, some people might know it as like a panini press, but without the ridges. It's just like a flat, like griddle top that you would press it down in. Sometimes there's also salami on it. That is a hotly contested debate between the cities of Miami and Tampa.
Like they need more of a rivalry. They already have a football team.
Yeah.
Problems.
Tampa says yes, and Miami says no.
I feel like Miami might get a little more of a pull because that's where Little Havana is.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like, I don't know, as far as authenticity goes, they might.
Yeah. So this should come as no surprise. The origins of the Cubanos aren't entirely known. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, travel between Cuba and Florida was actually quite easy, and Cubans would frequently sail back and forth for employment, pleasure, and family visits. Because of this constant and largely undocumented movement of people, culture, and ideas, it's actually kind of impossible to say exactly when the Cuban sandwich originated. It probably did happen somewhere like in Florida, right? Because we wouldn't call it a Cuban sandwich if you were in Cuba.
Right. You would just call it a sandwich.
Be a sandwich, right? So
true.
So the Cubano is probably something that happened in Florida at some point. Like it was probably a form of sandwich that existed in Cuba, but made its way into Florida and eventually became what we call the Cubano.
Sure.
Because,
It's really funny.
That's like in France, you don't call French fries, you just call them fries because you're in France. So, right? Or do I have that wrong?
No, that's right. Just to be annoying. They're actually called
Pommes frites.
Apple fries, because potatoes are pomme de terre, apples of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And so like another derivative like apple fries, but they're not apples. They're potatoes.
Yeah. If you want to learn more, listen to our very first episode of our podcast.
Oh my gosh, we talked about french fries.
We did.
You're right, we did.
Some people believe that the sandwich was a common lunch food for workers that were in cigar factories and sugar mills of Cuba and the cigar factories of Key West in the mid 1800s. Eventually, the cigar industry in Florida shifted to Tampa from Key West. Tens of thousands of Cuban, Spanish, and Italian workers moved to the area, jumpstarting the growth of Tampa from a village to a bustling city.
Wow.
By the 1960s, Cuban sandwiches were also common in Miami cafeterias and restaurants because the city had gained a lot of Cuban residents after Fidel Castro's 1959 rise to power. There was also a lot of Italians that ended up in Tampa, and that is where the salami got introduced into the Cubano.
Wow.
Because of the mix of Cubans and Italians there. So eventually they put salami on it, whereas in Miami they don't.
Nice.
And it is, I don't know, it's because I don't live in Florida, but apparently it's a pretty hotly debated topic of yes, salami, no salami.
Lord have mercy.
So I'm not going to talk about that or get into that debate, although our recipe doesn't have salami because we're using the recipe from Chef.
Right.
And that's kind of it. All that I had about the history, honestly. I didn't have a ton when it comes to that. Comes to the sandwich, because it's kind of a newer thing and people don't really know when it was formed, actually. So, as I mentioned, the recipe that we're going to start to make for this episode is going to be the recipe that they make in the movie Chef.
Yum!
I've already mentioned this recipe was created by Chef Roy Choi for the movie. He developed the recipe. So we're using his. We'll see you in a second.
Ooh.
All right. So getting into the recipe, the first thing I'm going to actually talk about is the bread. I wanted to try to make this at least as close to authentic as I could. At our grocery stores, you can't find Cuban bread. Because we live in Texas.
Do you think we'd be able to find it if we lived in Florida?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
That's kind of cool.
I did find a recipe by, we've used him before and some other things, Joshua Weitzman. And he made a homemade Cubano recipe. And in that, he makes his own bread. And from what I could tell, this was fairly authentic Cuban bread. So I'm going to go over that recipe first. And then we're going to talk about the rest of the sandwich.
Cool.
So for the bread, you need 1 1/4 cups of water at 100 degrees Fahrenheit. You need a tablespoon of quick rising yeast, 3.5 cups of bread flour, a tablespoon of sugar, 2 teaspoons of salt, and 1.5 tablespoons of lard. And for making the bread, in a small bowl, you'll put together the warm water and the yeast, cover it with plastic, and let it sit for about 8 minutes. While that's going on, you can, in the bowl of a stand mixer, put the dough hook on it, add the bread, flour, sugar, and salt. And you'll want to whisk that together until it's combined. You can turn the mixer to medium-low speed to start mixing that. And slowly add in that yeast mixture. And you want to mix that until combined. And once you have a cohesive dough, you want to keep mixing it for another 2 to 3 minutes. After that, you can add the lard into the mixer and continue mixing that for about a minute until it's all combined and smooth. Nice. Then you'll want to grease a medium-sized bowl, shape your dough into a ball, put it into the bowl, and cover it for about 45 minutes to an hour until it's about doubled in size. Then you'll open that up, press it down to degas it.
Same.
Yeah, same thing. If you ever need gassing, just lay down and press on yourself. You can degas.
Honestly, though. when I eat too much dairy.
You got to degas sometimes.
I need a good degassing.
Nasty. Once you've done that, you will divide the dough into 2 pieces. Then you'll cover it with a towel again and let it rest for 10 minutes. After that, you can take one of the pieces, flatten it out into about 1/2 inch thick rectangle. Then from the long edge of that rectangle, you'll roll it up, kind of like a cinnamon roll, taper off the ends and pinch in the sides. Then you're going to roll the log out until it's about 16 inches and place it on a parchment-lined baking sheet. And you'll do the same for the other piece of dough. So then you'll, at that point, have 2 logs that are about 16 inches. I can't do this podcast. I quit. I'm saying the word log. You're thinking of Watcher, aren't you, from yesterday?
No, I'm just thinking of the word log. And
thought you were thinking about and they're like, let's watch Carl's log.
Yeah.
You'll cover it again for about 30 minutes. And while that's happening, you can preheat the oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Spray the logs with water, as well as put a pan of boiling water at the bottom of the oven after you place the baking sheet into the oven.
And like Bon Marie style?
Yeah, so you're basically trying to get steam to happen in your oven. And you'll leave all that in there for 8 to 10 minutes. Then you can take the pan of water out and continue to let the bread bake for another 20 to 22 minutes until lightly browned. Oh, I forgot a step. Going back to when you preheat the oven, you'll also want to score a shallow seam along the length of the dough. And this is actually something I want to talk about real quick.
Oh, yeah.
So in this recipe, you score the bread to open it up and to help let the gas out when it's baking.
Sure, it's been degassed.
Yeah, but it degasses a little bit more while it's baking.
Good, as we all should.
But traditionally, you don't actually do this step. You lay a long, moist palmetto piece on top of the loaf while it bakes. And that actually gives it a shallow trench. That's the traditional way to do it for Cuban bread. I don't have access to palmetto fronds because I don't live in Florida.
Does that just mean palm fronds?
It's a type of palm tree, yeah. That is how you traditionally do it, but I don't have access to that, so I will be doing it just with a knife. And then you have the bread. So, going into the rest of the recipe, get ready because it's a long list.
I'm ready.
All right, so the ingredients for the rest of, again, this is a sandwich. I will remind everyone this is a sandwich.
It's not actually.
But it is fairly complex. The ingredients. You need 1 large bone-in pork shoulder. We used a Boston butt. 4 cups of orange juice, 2 cups of water, 1/2 cup of rice wine vinegar, 1/2 cup of spiced rum, 1/2 cup of kosher salt. Yes, I said 1/2 cup.
That's a lot.
It's a lot of salt. 1/4 cup dark brown sugar, a whole head of garlic, 2 stems of oregano, 2 stems of rosemary, 2 stems of thyme, 2 stems of sage, and 3 bay leaves. Those are all the ingredients for the brine that we're going to be doing for the pork. So for this first step, you're going to take that pork shoulder, Boston butt, whatever you get, and you're going to, if you need to, remove any excess fat or skin, and then you're going to score the fat cap on the top. You're going to combine the orange juice, water, rice wine vinegar, rum, salt, brown sugar, garlic, that whole head of garlic, which you'll have peeled and crushed at that point. The oregano, rosemary, thyme, sage, and bay leaves in a bowl and whisk to combine. Then you'll place the pork shoulder in a large bowl, pour the marinade over the top, and make sure it's completely submerged in that marinade or brine, whatever you want to call it. Then you'll cover and refrigerate that for at least 12 hours. Once you are done with that, you'll take it out of that and you'll pat it dry. And then we're going to make the mojo marinade. So for that, we need half a cup of olive oil, 3 oranges juiced and zested, 6 limes also juiced and zested, 2 stems of oregano chopped, half a cup of chopped cilantro, a 1/4 cup of chopped mint leaves, another whole head of garlic peeled and crushed. You'll need a tablespoon of kosher salt, a tablespoon of freshly ground pepper, 2 tablespoons of toasted and freshly ground cumin. So once again, you'll combine all of those ingredients and whisk those together. Then you will put the pork shoulder back into that same bowl that you used for the brine. Once you have taken the pork out, patted it dry, then you can discard the brine. You don't need it anymore. You'll put the pork shoulder back into that same bowl, pour the mojo marinade that you just made on top of that, and you'll want to spend a couple minutes massaging the marinade into the pork and then cover and refrigerate it for 2 hours. After those 2 hours, you can remove the pork from the marinade, brush off any large pieces of herbs, place it on a wire rack that is on top of a rimmed baking sheet. So that way it's slightly elevated and will allow the juices of the pork to fall into the baking sheet so that it catches it and doesn't just fall into your oven. You will brush the pork with some of that marinade that's still in the bowl and roast it at 350 degrees. This says for 2.5 hours. It's really going to be up to the size of the pork as well as your oven. So you could start at 2.5 hours, but really what you want to do is wait until the pork registers 165 degrees Fahrenheit at its thickest point. That's the most important thing. And then at that point, you can let it sit for about 30 minutes. Or you can refrigerate it if you're not going to be using it immediately. All right. So after you spent about 1.5 days of time making the pork
Woo!
And the bread,
Woo!
You can actually eat your sandwich.
Great. I am so hungry.
What we're going to do now is we are going to get some slices of that Cuban bread. If you want, you can toast the insides. We did that. So you can get your slices and toast it on a pan or on your plancha if you do have a plancha. Then you're going to slice pieces of that mojo pork, lay it on your Cuban sandwich bread. You'll put a piece of ham on there, which you could also sear the pork and the ham too if you want to do that beforehand. Up to you. We did that just to get a little bit more browning on the pork and ham and to heat it up as well. So that kind of helps keep the whole sandwich warm when you're making it. So you have your pork, you have your ham. Then you're going to put some Swiss cheese on top of that. And then you're going to lay a couple slices of dill pickles on top of that. And then the last step is that you smear mustard on your top piece of bread.
It's a good word, smear.
Smear. You're going to smear it.
Good.
All right. And then you'll want to heat up your plancha. Or if you don't have a plancha, you can heat up a pan and do this kind of grilled cheese style where you will put some butter on the pan or the plancha, lay your sandwich on top of it so it get it nice and toasty, and you'll smother some butter on the top slice of bread. And then you will either, if you have the plancha, you can press it down at this point, or if you don't have that, you can press it down using another pan or a spatula or something like that. Or if you don't want to press it down, you could just flip it like a normal grilled cheese. Once it's toasted on the bottom, you'll flip the sandwich to the other side and cook the other half. And you want to do this until the cheese is melted and everything is pretty much warm inside and the bread is a nice golden brown. And then you will slice the sandwich diagonally and eat it finally after all that work.
You're probably starving by now.
Probably. We were. So we will jump over to Rave or Roast and talk about the sandwich.
Boop, boop.
Oh, baby. I was worried that this was going to be Really disappointing.
Yes, I know.
Because I built it up in my head for 7 years.
Yes, I know.
But let me tell you, it was not. Okay, I know this is a clean podcast. I will bleep this out. But that was so good.
That's how good it was.
Oh, man. Like, God, it was a lot of work. Especially when you're, like, trying to record at the same time.
Yes.
It, like, doubled the length of time that it would take to normally make brines and marinades. It probably wouldn't have taken me that long. But it took a while. Because I had to start and stop. Yeah, it was annoying. I also tried to do it. I forgot to mention this, but I also, for assistance with figuring out how to do the recipe correctly, I utilized Binging with Babish's video that he did a long time ago, covering this recipe as well. In honor of that, I did our video in sort of a similar vibe that he does his videos, where he has like the camera angled at the kitchen counter, and you don't see his head, you just see like his chest or his stomach and up.
I'm excited for
like
me to edit this.
It took a while. I did mess up on some things. I sliced the bread too deeply, so it spread out more than it was supposed to, so the bread didn't rise quite as much, and it was a little more flat.
I mean, I thought it was still good.
Yeah, it tasted fine, but it was supposed to have risen more than it did. And I also scored... This was kind of funny. I haven't scored a fat cap in a very long time, so I kind of forgot how to do that. I probably should have looked it up.
Honestly, sounds like a band name. Didn't even know what it was until you explained it to me. Scoring a fat cap, band name.
It does sound like it means something else. I scored that fat cap.
Ew, what does that even mean?
I don't know. I sliced like down to the meat itself, which you're not supposed to do, because if you score all the way down to the meat, you're cutting off like the fibrous connections of the fat, right? So when you cook it and pull it out of the oven, it looked like puzzle pieces had gone missing, because instead of having a nice full fat cap, it
so that's
was
like a hat of fat on top of the butt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like a thick layer of fat.
All over the
on
butt,
the
or
butt.
just the top of the butt?
On one side of the butt.
Okay.
There was like squares missing now. So you could just see the actual meat part itself. And there was just like kind of random squares missing because they had like slid off
Oops.
or melted off because I had scored it too deeply.
Oops.
So that was a mistake. Also, probably my biggest cardinal sin was I didn't fully cook the pork roast and I got food poisoning. So, whoops.
I didn't though, so I'm not super sure how that happened.
I think when I was... So we ate the edges of it and that was fine. But some of the internal meat was not cooked enough. And while I was slicing it up to save it in the fridge, I think I snuck a couple pieces of what was probably still undercooked meat. And then I got sick.
But you put that exclusively on yours, though.
No,
you must not have put that on mine.
No, I mean, I think I ate some of that after while I was putting it away.
Oh, ew.
Not
okay.
on my sandwich itself.
Oh, ew, gross. Did you notice it was underdone?
No, otherwise I wouldn't have eaten it.
Oh, okay.
That's my point.
Okay. Well, anyway, all of that to say is it was like, yeah, it was just you, not me, just to clarify.
Yeah. So that was a whoopsie. So again, definitely be sure, like, don't worry about how much time it's been cooking. Just make sure 165 degrees Fahrenheit at its thickest point, and make sure that you don't actually like accidentally hit a bone, because you'll get a false read on your thermometer. You'll want to actually get the proper point, which can be a little tricky if you've never done it before or haven't tested a temperature of a big roast like that in a long time, like myself. Despite that, oh my God, the flavor of the pork, when you pulled it out, it had been sitting in like this... Benjamin Babish correctly calls it a symphony of citrus. Well, I love that phrase because it's correct. It's been sitting in just so much like herbs and juice for those 12 hours. Then you have that really lovely mojo marinade. What are you doing?
I'm adding a symphony to your description.
And you have that lovely mojo marinade on it that it cooks in. And oh my God, you take a piece of that off and it's so good My mouth is watering thinking about it right now. I have some in the fridge. I might need to eat some later. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have the words in English language to properly describe it. All I can reference is when Binging with Babish ate it, and all he could say was, "Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God." Like, that's all I can think about is like how to kind of properly describe it.
That's why I was trying to sing it, but I guess you didn't like my little
I didn't know that's what you're
underlayer of
No, I liked it. I didn't know that's what you're doing though.
Would you like me to continue while you continue describing?
No, I'm wrapping up. Okay. I don't want to continue on for too long because I've probably already gone too long. But yeah, it's like 100 out of 10 for me. Oh my God, it was so good. 100 out of 10. Hashtag. Best thing I've made probably ever.
Hashtag humble brag.
And I will say, like, it was long and a lot of ingredients and kind of cumbersome. It would have been simpler if I had just gotten like a French baguette and used that as the bread.
But that's no fun. We go for authenticity on this podcast, okay?
So it was long, but not like that hard. It was just a lot of ingredients that you had to prep. It was mostly prep, honestly, more than anything. Prep and then a long cook time.
And you know what I hate? Prep.
Yeah. But in terms of like technical skills to make this, not really that much. So like, I think it's fairly easy for somebody that doesn't cook that often because it's mostly just if you can prep your ingredients well and then combine it and just follow the recipe, you're probably going to be fine. Versus like the souffle we did, right? Like that's a lot of like more technical skills that you kind of need to have learned over time.
Yes.
And there's a lot of ways that you can easily mess up if you don't know those skills.
Those were so fun.
Yeah, they were. They were a lot of fun. Whereas this, it's really not that many skills. It's just a lot of like ingredients you have to prep. And that took a while. But at the end of the day, like it wasn't that hard of a recipe. I mean, the recipe for that is written out is 5 steps. 3 of them is prepping the pork with the marinade and stuff. The 4th one's cooking the pork. And the 5th one is making the sandwich.
Sure.
So, like, it's really not that hard. It's just a lot of steps.
Right.
Or a lot of ingredients.
I get you. It was a long grocery list.
It was, yeah. I don't recommend, if you're on a budget, I don't necessarily recommend this. Because it was a lot of ingredients.
And we accidentally bought the biggest Boston butt, like, to ever come out of Boston, probably.
Yeah, I got excited and I bought a large one. So what'd you think?
I have never had one before. I've heard you talk about them with the reverence of perhaps, like, one speaking about a spiritual experience. That can really only be how I describe how you talk about Cubanos to me over the years of us being together. And so I was ready and waiting for this to be a magical sandwich. And it was. It was indeed a magical Mr. Mistopheles sandwich.
Yeah.
It was so good. So good. Because I like sandwiches, right? I am a sandwich gal. I like sandwiches. Sandwiches are good. Paninis, paninos. Like, I am all up in sandwiches. So I was excited about this. And I've never had this kind of pork before, so I wasn't super sure like what all was happening, but truly all the flavor, it's a lot of flavors and your brain is like a little confused at first, but your brain is also like, this is a very good experience. I am enjoying myself. So like the cheese and the pickles are there, I think, to help add some saltiness, because even though it sounds like there's a lot of salt in there, you have to salt brine it, so it's really not that salty of a meat. I would say it's not like salted pork, like that's like different,
right?
So like the cheese adds a saltiness and a gooiness, and then the pickles are crunchy and sour, and then the mustard, it's Dijon, so it's right, it kind of packs a boom, like that's a punch, and that's cutting through the cheese.
We use Dijon, but I think you can also use just normal yellow mustard too.
Sure. Again, that'll be even more
mustardy,
even more vinegar forward. So that would be like more sour. So that's cutting through like the fattiness of the pork and the sort of denseness of the cheese. So honestly, I think it all works together. At first, I was just like, this sounds cuckoo.
Yeah.
But like the ham being in there too, like regular normal ham, we just got like deli ham.
Mm-hmm.
And that added like another texture on top of it, a different meat texture. So it's a texture. It's a different meat flavor. All of these things are happening in your brain. Yeah. I can see why Babish said it was like a symphony because all of these things are going on at one time.
Yeah. Because, it's not just like meat, but like that meat is so flavored with fruits and herbs and stuff like that, that there's just a billion different things going on. And to answer your question, I think the pickle does help like cut through some of that savoriness.
Yeah.
To balance it out, like you said. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So whereas we made like it was a pretty big sandwich. Like we made these for dinner and then we made them again for lunch because Kendall went back and he recooked the pork.
I did fix the pork.
So it's fine now. It didn't try to kill us a second time. But so we had it for lunch that day. Oh my goodness. I was so sleepy because it was kind of a big sandwich. So it was funny when you were like, the workers used to take this for lunch. I'm like, yo, were they sleeping on the job though? Because when we had this for lunch, I was so sleepy.
Well, when you think about it, it was cigar factories and sugar mills, right? So those are probably pretty labor intensive. So I bet this was really filling and energizing and helped them get through the rest of the day.
Well, I hope so because it made me want to take a nap.
I do remember when you first took a bite of the sandwich, it was like your taste buds like were firing off and you weren't fully processing it. Because at first you were just like, yeah, this is good. And you're like, oh, this is good. Wow, this is good. This is good. Like, whoa.
Yeah, it was like I didn't quite get all the pieces yet, right? Because when you first bite into it, you just like, it's like mainly bread and maybe a little bit of meat, but then like you keep going and then, oh, well, there's the rest of it. Oh, I hit the pickle or whatever. Mm-hmm. Then I was like, okay, wow. This slaps.
It has officially hit slap status.
This is slap status. Like, this slaps. That's it.
All the slaps.
Period. That'll preach.
10 out of 10 slaps.
I'll slap you 10 times. Wait, what? No, this was so good. I would definitely give this a 10 out of 10 for sure. I was going to give it an 11 out of 10, but the first go around did make you sick. So this is just a 10 out of 10.
Deducted from 11 out of 10 because of my own mistake.
Well, no, I felt really bad because only you were affected.
Yeah.
Not myself, which I didn't understand. I was like, but I ate the same thing you did.
Yeah. We had the same food like all day long. The only thing I could think of is I had a piece that happened to have not fully cooked pork when I was putting it away because I was sneaking some extra pieces.
That had to have been it, honestly.
Yeah, that's the only thing I can think of.
Which that's crazy. That's crazy.
And it couldn't have been very much because I wasn't sick for very long. So I think it was only a very small amount that like messed with me.
A little bit of botulism.
Just a little bit of botulism. Just a little.
That's my song. Do you like it?
I liked it.
Thank you.
That's good. Okay, well, I think we're going to wrap it up. So super, super highly recommend this recipe.
Do it.
So good. Thanks for listening in. Just as a reminder, for this season, we've been wanting to do some listener challenges. So for
listener challenges. Why'd you say it like that?
I don't know. So for our first episode, one hit 20 listens, and then we're bumping that challenge up by 5 listens for every episode. So since this is the third one, if we hit 30 listens on this episode, we are going to release some special bonus content.
Should we give an example of the bonus content? Like a little teaser. Make people want to share us with their grandma and grandpa and
Sure.
boss.
Why don't you sweeten their palate and entice them a little bit?
How about I sweeten the deal? How about that?
Sweeten the deal? Okay.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what you said, but okay, I'll do
Just
that.
give them a little aperitif.
Got it. I can do that. How about we record ourselves doing a blind taste test? That's always funny.
That is.
So we did that one time for like a date thing. That sounds weird. How do I make this sound clean? It was PG, I promise. But part of the date was like, you're cooking, but your partner has to be cooking with a blindfold and you have to be their arms. You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
And then I stuck random stuff in your hand. Like, what's this?
What did we make with that? Was that the apple pie that we made? Or was that something else?
I don't remember. It was some kind of pie. I'd have to check our pictures. Anyway, so, okay. If that doesn't interest you, how about just a video of us pie in the face? How about that? We love a food fight. We're going to put some newspaper down on our floor and maybe, do a little pie in the face.
Yeah.
That sounds fun, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so as you kind of alluded to there, for that bonus content, we plan to release it both as a special bonus podcast episode, but also we are going to release it as a YouTube video, a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
That we'll be putting together.
You're going to want to see it.
So yeah, you'll definitely want to check it out.
Yeah.
We really don't market this podcast at all. So any new listeners that we get is purely from you and purely from our listeners just helping us out and spreading the word of this podcast through friends, family, coworkers, whoever. So anybody that you think will like this podcast, definitely let them know. It'll help us out greatly because we definitely want to continue doing this and growing it and making it into something special that people like. So please do help us out. Any new listeners are greatly appreciated. And if you are new to this podcast, welcome.
Hi.
We're excited to have you. All right. I think that will pretty much wrap it up. So thanks for listening. I am Ken Runquist.
And I'm Logan Runquist.
And this has been Who Ate It First. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.